that the Texan conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has finally and definitively lost this defamation suit against him. So Mr. Jones is one of the foremost pathological liars in the United States, and unsurprisingly, um, someone who vociferates in favor of Donald Trump. So Mr. Jones has lost this case, and he has to pay $49.3 million to the claimants. It all goes back to the Sandy Hook shooting. This crime took place in Connecticut about 10 years ago when somebody burst into a school, shot dead 20 children and 6 adults. Now, Mr. Jones claims that there was no Sandy Hook shooting, that no children were killed, that the grieving parents were in fact actors who were paid to pretend to have suffered the deaths of their children. So, what an outrageous slur. And as though these parents hadn't suffered enough that their children had been murdered, along comes Jones and has the chutzpah to claim, no, 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 your child wasn't killed, and there was no such incident. And anyway, Jones claimed the whole thing was faked in order to provide a justificatory argument for gun control, because Mr. Jones is an outspoken anti-gun control advocate, really saying there should be no restrictions on firearms, military-grade firearms for anyone, no background checks, and that you could carry them anywhere and things like that. There are 44,000 gun deaths per annum in the United States. 44,000. And Mr. Jones doesn't want anything to be done that would reduce this. So he's got a large following, and his auditors largely concur with his worldview. They are irrationalists like him. They are cognitively subnormal, prone to believing these ludicrous conspiracy theories. I mean, yes, conspiracies really exist, and some theories are plausible and might turn out to be true. But I think a lot of it turned out to be false, like that one that there were no murders which took place at that school in Sandy Hook. So some of the parents, Scarlett Lewis and Neil Heslin, whose 6-year-old Jesse was killed at that terrible incident, they took action against him. Because Alex Jones, as I say, he's got his listenership, and some of them have really drunk the Kool-Aid, and they fervently believe what he says. They hang on his every word, and they've harassed these grieving parents, sending them hate mail and so on, which, as you can imagine, would be incredibly upsetting for people. I mean, as if the murder of your child wasn't enough. So InfoWars is the name of Alex Jones's channel, and yeah, it ties in with white nationalism, is that white supremacism, and so on, with anti-Muslim bigotry, with all sorts of detestable beliefs. So the compensatory damages are supposed to cover the costs which accrue to the family as a result of the libelous statements made by Mr. Jones, all of the private security they were obliged to hire during the trial because a Jones supporter might physically attack them. So these are also punitive damages because they should have a dissuasive effect on those who would disseminate such lies about other people. And he perpetrated these lies, knowing it was obviously extremely hurtful to these people, and he repeated this persistently over several years. Anyway, he's got to stop. And Jones has been proven to be a liar, knowing a liar. His lawyers, they accidentally sent the entire contents of his phone to the lawyers on the other side, and it proved that Mr. Jones knew that Sandy Hook was real. It was no mistake. He wasn't even that deluded. He was deliberately lying. Anyway, I wonder if Trump will now distance himself from this guy. So InfoWars is owned by Free Speech Systems, and it has a value of something like $270 million. He's become very wealthy. He's also preyed on his vulnerable supporters, getting to buy nonsense medicines and so on, because he knows they're weak-minded, someone who could have been a televangelist. So I really hope that's the end of him. That's the last we hear of him. Now, I'm not trying to ban Alex Jones, but people don't need to facilitate him broadcast what he's saying. Hello there, mysteriously kind. So the dietary supplements he sold, like $800,000 in a day, was typical. Guns and paraphernalia associated with firearms, survivalist equipment because the end of the world is coming. There could be World War III, so you have to go and live in the woods in your tent with what other equipment you would need. Um, by creating this sense of crisis, he really hooked his supporters, um, because the truth was usually too mundane, was unclear. He wouldn't allow for any ambiguity. He'd also try to conceal evidence, and therefore he was saying to, what's the expression? To obstruct justice, they say in the United States. Exactly. And many Republicans put him on a pedestal. He's a sort of poster boy for the Trumpist movement. But a long period of silence on his behalf would be most warmly appreciated. Uh, so that's why the plaintiff's lawyers had 2 years worth of the text from Mr. Jones. He's even come over to the United States, to the United Kingdom, and started shrieking about how there should be no limitations on gun rights whatsoever. And why does he do this? Because it would be too dangerous to do so, despite guns killing tens of thousands of people each year in the United States. And how many people do Islamist terrorists kill in the United States typically? Like zero, most years, zero. Since 9/11, there's been that Boston bombing. There have been a couple of shooting incidents, but most years, absolutely zero. So ordinary guns, the hands of Americans, mostly white Americans, mostly Christian Americans, kill tens of thousands of people. Not that whites are bad or Christians are bad, but that guns out of control represent a far greater peril to the United States than Al Qaeda, the Taliban, or ISIS, or anything like that, all of them put together. Um, so anyway, it's astonishing that it just took so long. And Jones, he briefly took the stand. He wasn't in there when the final verdict was delivered. Um, and Jones was also lying about things like this U.S. Capitol riot on the 6th of January 2021, saying that there was no riot, the whole thing was faked and so on, it was all fake news. So this is the big lie theory. He would tell these barefaced lies, and it's hard to imagine someone would have the impudence to tell something which is such a flagrant lie. And some people believe that, thinking, well, no one would lie about something that big. It's not a lie that's related to the truth. This is the total opposite. But no, Jones was willing to do it many times. He monetized that. He made a career out of it. And I think it wasn't probably just pecuniarily actuated. Of course, he was adulated by a segment of American opinion. Anyway, so I would like him to disappear, but I don't think he's going to. Because even when his beliefs are disconfirmed, some people are so far gone, they have to just commit and say, the court was wrong, the court is biased, it's all the liberal left media or something like that. It's the deep state. So any disproof of their delusional beliefs, they take as proof of their delusional beliefs. So they weren't reasoned into these beliefs, and they can't be reasoned out of it. Yeah, and so he's already said it's a kangaroo rigged court. Right, thank you for following me. So please follow me on Patreon, and look at my website, George from Ireland. And thank you for donating on PayPal, georgecallahan79 at gmail.com. Goodbye.